When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's right, everybody. We are back, and this is episode 123. Is it actually episode 123?
Yes.
For some reason, I thought we had already done 123 like a long time ago. Weird. It's like 123 is such a big number, obviously 123, but it also feels as though we've been here. Maybe it's deja vu, or maybe it's the word revisiting in the title. So, title is revisiting old projects. There you go. Transitioning into the title, which was literally the next thing on the line there. I'm Matt. That's Mike, and this week we'll be discussing what to do when working on an older code base, and then in the web news. Fone Lyfe, spelled appropriately as F-O-N-E for phone and L-Y-F-E for life. Now, if that sounds interesting to you, and you want to support the show, you can go check us out on that Patreon. Leave a review or rating on your podcast app. Join us in our Discord server, or share this with your friends. And before I pass it off to Mike for a weekly pain point, I want to point out to everybody that our before the show, pre-show, whatever you want to call it, it's officially called Before the Show, is available now on Patreon. The first few episodes are going to be available for free for everybody. You can just go there and do it. I don't even think you need a Patreon account, although don't quote me. I don't think you do, but don't quote me. It's just in the post. You can go there, download the MP3 file, listen to it. It's basically our tangents taken to an all-new level. So we're not going to limit the topics of that to like business or web development or whatever. It's just going to be us chatting. So it might be web development based. It might be tech based. It might be totally something else. This week's is tech based. But just an FYI, we believe that we're going to make them for Patreons or patrons or whatever they are. Subscribers, whatever, only, and we'll, of course, make an appropriate announcement, and maybe there'll be a separate tier, or maybe they'll be available for all tiers. We haven't made full decisions, so please give those a listen. If you like them, let us know your feedback so that we know what we want to do, because nothing's set in stone. If everyone loves them, but they want them to be free forever, I mean, then maybe that'll be the case. We don't know yet. Maybe it'll be on another feed, who knows. But just an FYI, those are available now, so go check them out on Patreon. That's patreon.com/HTML, all the things. There'll be 2 episodes up at this time, 1 to 2. This one might be a little later, because we're recording later. But anyway, Mike, please, sir, take it away with your weekly pain points.
Okay, my weekly pain point this week is trapped inside. So it's only been a little while since I've decided to kind of lock myself down with my wife a little bit more. Because before we were a little bit more, willing to go out. We would go to the store multiple times a week. We would see some friends here and there and stuff like that. Like, we were still pretty careful, but we at least allowed ourselves a little bit more flexibility, because the cases around us, the COVID cases around us, were not too bad, right? Like, we weren't seeing the huge risk. We would wear a mask. We would do all the social distancing and that. At this point, cases are rising around us pretty heavily, pretty quickly. With the Christmas coming around the corner, people are out in scores Christmas shopping, so they don't care. Like, most people don't care. They'll go Christmas shopping in a mall on a Saturday and like pack themselves in, wait in line for 2 hours just to get into a store. So that's going on right now. And so we've just decided to kind of step a little bit back. We still go shopping. We're just trying to keep it to like once a week again, back in the old lockdown days. And we're trying not to see as many people as we can. So I'm trying to get to the vaccine without being infected. I don't want to get COVID.
Yes,
I don't want to get other people I don't want to give other people COVID. I don't want to be around it. I want to get the vaccine as soon as it comes out. I'm going to be, frontline. I'm not going to be a frontline worker getting the vaccine, but I'll be up there as soon as it reaches, us plebs, I guess, us people that don't need it. Well, we are, like, in terms of the vaccine, we are plebs, because we're not essential workers.
We're not essential workers, and like, we're not older, and so like, it's just the way it goes. But I mean, we'll see. There a lot of news to come out of our vaccine task force, or whatever Canada's calling it now. So we'll see. Also, I'm with you on the home sprint. So because this news and because the thing is out and is like marketable and I think is being already used as of us talking, basically I have been like my girlfriend and I had some like socially distant, don't worry, New Year's plans, and I think we're just gonna kind of kibosh them and maybe just like hang out and watch a movie, because I was like, let's maybe not, like, if there was no light at the end of the tunnel, like, we could be still, you know, following procedure as per what the government says, but still, you know, going out and doing the odd thing according to those regulations. But I'm kind of like, let's kind of just make it to the end and then we can do whatever the hell we want. So,
Exactly.
yeah, we're kind of, I believe we're in agreement for that. We just kind of discussed it briefly. So I think that's kind of where we're at as well. But my weekly pain point is more work-based. So we have verbal agreements with a lot of our clients. We like to kind of keep it sort of fast and loose, if you will. People that we work with, a lot of them are small business owners, and they prefer like structured big contracts. They just want to be like, hey, just invoice me what we agreed and do what you agreed, and that's it. So the verbal, so basically we have a verbal agreement like that with a particular client, and we are going to move that just because their work is just flowing in like crazy. So kind of as flow control, we're going to be moving that probably to an actual agreement of sorts. So we still have some sorting out to do, but that's my weekly pain point. We've been discussing it. Mike and I have been discussing it off and on, because it can be considered a touchy topic with, you know, whoever, like if a person suddenly gets switched from a verbal agreement to an actual agreement, they might think that, you know, we don't like working with them or something like that. And that's not the case. It's just the fact that we need flow control and a little bit of like cover, if you will, to make sure that we're giving good service and expected service. You know, we write down, we will respond by this time, and they know, oh, they will respond by in this amount of time. So it's just to make it a little bit more formal, a little bit more agreeable, and a little bit better communicated, I would say. But that's basically my weekly pain point. But this is a Mike heavy episode, so Mike, please, sir, take it away.
Okay, so we're talking revisiting old projects, and I'm just going to break down the segments a little bit here. So segment number 1 will be what are old projects, so just going to give you a definition of what I'm assuming they are. Segment number 2 will be how to get familiar with the code bases. This will be kind of a generalized section, which actually will refer to not only old projects, but any code base, so take what you will from that. And then the third one is kind of the question that I want to have this episode, which is, should you do a major refactor or build from scratch when you're talking about old projects? So how to maintain an old project. So let's get right into it. Segment number 1, what are old projects? So old projects can be anything that is using tech you don't currently support, anything that was built in the past with technology that you're not up to date with. It could be your own project, or it could be an inherited project in the workplace, right? So you could be getting to a workplace, and one of your first things can be like, hey, get up to date on this older project that we haven't updated in a while. You know, understand some of the ins and outs, figure it out. That could be your task. And that's not a very defined task. That might not be the best task to get when you get to a company, but it is something pretty common from my understanding. It's something that I've given some of my junior developers tasks to do, because it really does kind of put a little bit of pressure on you to understand the code, but it's also not pressure that you have to, you know, go in and develop a feature for something live and get going. It gives you a little bit of time to familiarize yourself with how the company writes code, and it provides a service to your company, because if we usually need to update some older stuff, we can allow our junior developers to kind of go in there and get their hands dirty and get used to a code base. So jumping right into the next segment here, how to get familiar with that code base. So the first thing that I would do if I was given an older code base to familiarize myself with, again, whether it's something I wrote myself or it's something that someone else wrote that I have to familiarize myself with, is try to launch it. Try to get the end-to-end going. So if it's a back-end, front-end kind of system where it has a back-end portal and a front-end application, I would, launch the back-end, launch the front-end, and try to do whatever it is that AB needs to do. If it's a pizza ordering application, I would try to order a pizza. Like I would try to get the full end-to-end task complete, right? And you're going to find that a lot of the times, even this part is a little bit challenging and will lead you down a few rabbit holes where, like, what kind of server are they using? What kind of technology? Like, do I need a dev server to be able to run it? Do I need to npm install the packages? Do I need to put this on a server because it's using some sort of tech that's server based? Do I need to have like, MAMP or LAMP or whatever? Like, do I need to have a full stack operational? And that'll teach you a lot of what you need to know about the project right off the bat, and could be the thing that like propels you into the project. It could be easy. It could be just HTML, JavaScript, CSS. You launch a live server and you're done. And that task is complete. But again, it'll show you the complexity of the project that you're looking at. So next here is find a small task which you want to accomplish or which you've been assigned to accomplish on this project. That small task could be, hey, can you update all of our footers from 2019 to 2020? It could be as small as, hey, can you update some of the language on this page specifically? Can you update the iconography here? Like, it's usually something fairly small that you want to start yourself with, right? It could be a little bit of a JavaScript thing where you're, changing a date and time function or something like that. And what this allows you to do is allows you to, again, familiarize yourself with some intricacies of the code. It allows you to start like actually looking at the code elements and figuring out what controls what. Because a lot of the times, like, you go into a project, and if it's a really big project, it's not going to be as easy as going into the index.html file and finding, the copyright and changing the copyright. A lot of the times, that copyright is going to be controlled by some sort of date component, which is going to be also controlled by something else. And it's going to be either needlessly complex or complex for a reason, and you have to find that out as well. During that process, you can recommend refactoring if it is needlessly complex, stuff like that. And that's all kind of a valuable add that you can add to an older code base as well as you go through it.
I was going to actually say this at the end, but I think this might be the time to sort of jump in. But we discussed this last year as well, and then it didn't end up happening just because the amount of new clients didn't increase, but the projects themselves grew. But as we started like accruing a lot of clients on our like web agency business, to be clear for the listener, we kind of like saw like a big growth curve of like smaller projects, but from a bunch of people. And one of the things that we were looking at doing was getting, I can't remember the name of it now, not a CMS, but like a customer, like, a CRM or something, like a CRM or something. We were just shopping. And it was basically what I wanted to do was basically have like, if Mike was my customer, I'd write, Mike's name or Mike's company name, however we want to identify him in the system. And then I would write notes on him. So if, for example, I did 2 projects for him, one old, one new, and the old project was built a certain way, and like we would write notes under the old project under Mike of like, this is how we fixed this issue. We had trouble changing the nav bar. This is how we did it. This article was really helpful with a link. Just notes that would help future people, almost like a knowledge base on that customer, on the specific project that we're working on. And so if you, as the client, Mike, in this example, would come to me and say, hey, can you change these small things? If those small things, like the footer, for whatever reason, is in a weird spot in the CMS, and that's why it was challenging, I could like refer to the notes and like, Control F, whatever, footer. Oh, yep, there's some notes about the footer. How, like, there does come a point, though, and we've talked about this, where the investment in time of, first of all, you got to buy this system or rent this system or make this system, like this whole note-taking system, or like have a full CRM or whatever. Like I said, we were just shopping. It the point is, like, at what point do you think that would become invaluable, or do you think that it would be even a thing that you would reach for? So someone reaches out to you, you have to familiarize yourself. You're like, damn, it's been like 4 years or something. I haven't done this in a long time. Would you would you reach for those notes, or would you just jump in first? Like, is there, obviously in IT, for example, things are rapid. So if you're trying to fix something, you would check really quick probably. If you're unsure, then maybe you would check the notes if like your notes kept on a customer are really good, because that might make it really quick. Sometimes the notes is the first thing you reach for, depending on your workflow. But when it comes to like familiarizing yourself with a code base, it's more involved than just like, hey, my Facebook button doesn't work. So like how would you handle it? And do you think that having notes like that is even worth it?
So, okay. And this leads perfectly into my next point. So that was a good build up. But essentially with the notes or readmes in terms of a web development project, a lot of this stuff is going to be captured in a readme. It's possible that it could also be captured in a task management software. So if this project was around before you were there, or even when you were there, and it was being worked on by a team of people and they were using something like Jira, for instance, then you can kind of go in and figure out a few things from those tickets as well. And that's something that you can use in the future. That's not something that I would jump into right away. I wouldn't jump into Jira and check what people were working on. But it's definitely something, it's one of the steps that I would take to solve or debug or to move forward. But with like a README for the web development project, that would be one of the first things I look at as well. And maybe I should have mentioned that before, but in my next point, I have here read comments, variable names, function names, file names, and including READMEs, right? This would be where you would read the README. And a lot of the times that will give you the layout of how to build your project. So definitely when you're launching the project, you're going to be looking at the README. Let's be serious, because that's where all the commands of how to launch a project should be. And when I say should, it's a very much an asterisk, because who knows what kind of documentation was written here. If there was great documentation, awesome. You're going to have a way easier time. But most of the time, I can say pretty confidently that you're going to have a situation where the documentation is not going to be great. Whether it's worthwhile to invest in it, that's a whole other story. And I personally think, yes, for sure, it's worthwhile investing in it. Like I said before, I've talked to developers at larger companies. They do 50-50 splits. So a developer at like a large company, probably like Apple, probably like Google, their development day is, or their development time on a project is split 50-50 between documentation and code writing. Again, that's in my opinion,
that's a big split. Like that's
a big split.
It's more than I think most like rapid fire entrepreneurs, I want to say, people that are like building for their own app or something, would want to spend less than 10% of the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in a startup, it's not possible to do a 50-50 split. Yeah, it's just like, it's not realistic. When you have a large team and a large amount of developers, it's required, right? Because if you're passing functionality back and forth between teams, how the heck are you going to do that fast without really good documentation? Like, you might hire someone even though their coding skills aren't very good, if their documentation skills are great, because they can build out your features. Yes, it won't be as robust as a feature built out by some 10x developer, but if that 10x developer can't document shit and you need to pass that functionality on, the next developer might spend 800 hours trying to figure out this person's like chicken scratch and waste company money and company time. So it's really, really important in a larger company, in a larger team setting, and a setting where you need to support products for 5, 10, 15 years, that you write damn good documentation. And again, if you're lucky enough to step into a project that has great documentation, start there 100%. We always tell people that, like, when they're learning libraries, when they're learning frameworks, when they're learning anything, JavaScript, documentation, the READMEs, all those things are really, really important. And learning how to read them and use them is important. Like, Matt and I, when we were doing our schooling, we spent like a significant portion of one of our courses learning how to read a spec sheet. Right? Like we just had to learn how to read the documentation of like a microcontroller, just so that we knew, because yes, Google can solve a lot of your questions, but as soon as you get into these niche tasks and these niche softwares that need to be like used to integrate with something else, A, B, and C, like if you need a library that needs to integrate with another third-party library, you're going to get into a situation where Google is just not going to cut it. And if you don't know how to read documentation, you're not going to be able to solve the answer. So learning how to read documentation might be a whole other topic that we cover, because I think it is important.
Another thing. Oh, sorry. I was just going to add though, is like on top of documentation though, it's easy to get bogged down in wanting to do something quick. So if you're like, man, how the hell do I update this blog? And you just start like pulling levers, clicking buttons, whatever, and it's just not working. Or if more specifically, usually if something's actually broken, or if you're not sure how something is working, learning how to read logs is also exceptionally valuable, because it will lead you to that thing to Google, but sometimes it will just lead you to the solution. So like what Mike is saying with the niche, everything has its own sort of setup. Not everything, but most projects, most frameworks, most CMSs, whatever, servers, everything, they have like their own set of logs. And it's very valuable for you to jump in and learn how to read those logs and figure out exactly what is going on. I'll give a really basic consumer example. So I have a laptop that is like more powerful than my current desktop. And I was streaming, like Twitch streaming from my laptop. But I noticed that sometimes when streaming from my laptop, the stream would die, but it was weird. Like I wasn't having any trouble with connectivity. I wasn't losing connection to the game. I was playing online. But I would just like, the stream would die for the viewer, but they would refresh and it would come back. And everyone was saying it's on the playback end, like it's on their end. But I was like, but it doesn't make sense because multiple people are experiencing it. It must be from me, and it's not. Sometimes I play an older game, so I just use my older computer, and like, doesn't do it for my older computer. And from reading logs, I found out, here it is. Here's the problem. 0.2% of frames are being dropped due to bandwidth limitation. Why? I'm on Wi-Fi. So it's just like, it's 5 gigahertz, it's fast, it's doing its job, but it's a lot to ask for. Connect to the server, transcode, send it out over Wi-Fi while like doing live voice chat, and God knows what else is happening on that Wi-Fi channel at that time. And so that makes sense. 0.2% correlates with like you don't want any drop, or is like a little bit of drop, right? And if there is a drop of 0.2, that's why when you refresh, it comes back. And that knowledge only came to me because everything I was Googling was saying it's on the playback user's end. Tell them to change this setting, change this, change that, change the servers, change whatever. But now I know, no, I'm getting that error because the blip is so small that like the player is screwing up, but they're screwing up because of me. And so now I know, okay, like I'll either wire it up or maybe I'll lower I'm going to try a couple of things because it only happens here and there. But like reading the logs helped me with that niche issue, of which literally no article helped me.
Exactly. And that perfectly goes into reading, like learning how to use the inspect element, reading the console logs, reading the tools, the debugger, using breakpoints and stuff like that. And this is a really important one because think about it. When you're going into a new code base, you press, you run the code and it shows you the website and it shows you a bunch of the stuff. Like if, let's say the website is showing you a bunch of, store items, right? And in the store, there's like, a toothbrush or like, toothpaste, like there's just a bunch of store items and it just shows you it. But really what's happening in the background is it's contacting an API of sorts, or it's using a local database, right? You don't know. It's contacting an API or using a local database, finding that information, taking it, getting it in some format. You don't know what format it's getting it in. Maybe a JSON, maybe XML, whatever. It's getting it in some sort of format and then parsing that format and displaying it on the page. So there's a lot of steps that go into just bam and show a bunch of store items. And for you as a developer, you've got to know those steps because if you need to go in and let's say instead not only showing price, they also want to show quantity of the item. You need to figure out where that information is coming from. And with inspect element tools, you can go in, look at the code inside of inspect element, inside the sources tab, find where you think the code is coming from, where you think that API is coming from, where you think it's being called, and start putting breakpoints. And as soon as it hits a breakpoint, first, you know exactly where it's coming from. You know exactly what's calling it because the breakpoint will give you a call stack. It'll give you everything, all the variables that are currently initialized at that certain time, right? And you'll be able to see how the data is coming in what format, and you'll be able to kind of go in and maybe put some console logs down to see exactly what you're getting and when you're getting it, and then you'll see, oh look, this is in JSON. The store item is in JSON format, and it's literally like the quantity is literally labeled as QTY in this format, and all I have to do is just take that and put it in the HTML. Bam, you're done. If you know how to use the inspect tool debugger in Chrome, Firefox, whatever, they all work pretty well. You'll be a much better developer because debugging is going to be extremely important. And I believe we have an episode on Chrome debugging or Chrome, like the Chrome DevTool debugging. You can go back and listen to that. But regardless, learn how to use that debugger. Don't be scared of it. Open it up anytime you're in the you're doing any sort of code, see what's going on, see the console log errors. Again, learn how to read the console log errors as well, because that's going to be a key point. There's a lot of noise. That's something that I'll throw out there, especially if you have extensions. If you have an ad blocker or if you have an extension that intercepts scripts or whatever for security, you're going to see a bunch of errors, and you got to know what is an error that actually pertains to you. That's why maybe it's better to actually do your debugging inside of like an incognito window, so you can get those get those, false errors out of there and get rid of the noise. But with that being said, moving on here, don't get too overwhelmed with how much code there is. If it's a big project, focus on the small chunks and specific functionality rather than the full end-to-end. It's really easy to go into a project, see that it's, like 150 files, 150 components, all different entry points, all different stores, etc., etc. If it's a React or Vue project, it could look very intimidating to someone that is not familiar with large projects. But what you need to do is kind of fight yourself on being intimidated too much and just focus on the small stuff. Like I said before, if you find a small task, you're going to be focused usually on a couple of files. And that's all you really care about at that time. And as you start understanding the interconnection between the files, because a lot of the time you'll have like a component within a component, or this component is using the store, like like a state management system to get a bunch of information, and that's how the pattern is in place throughout the entire project, you'll start having that aha moment being like, oh, that's how these things communicate. And when you have that aha moment, you're very well on your way to understanding the project. You're very well in that situation where you're like, okay, now I can handle pretty much any of these components. They're all working kind of the same way. They're just, transferring and showing different information. No big deal. You just need to get yourself slowly to that point. Don't overwhelm yourself by opening 50 files and trying to figure out like, where's this file coming in? Like, why is there 50 files that are labeled index.html? Like, what's going on? Try to find the files that pertain to you. And there's different strategies on how to do that. One of the ideal things that I would say is trying to go in and find the main files, like the files that are generating the code. So for instance, like the main.js file or the app.vue file or whatever it is that in React, the file that's kind of taking all the other files and instantiating them, initializing them. And from there, work your way down into the more like niche files or the more component-based files. So don't start like all the way down the stack on like an icon file. Try to get in a more generalized file and work your way down.
Well, here's a question for you. So, you return to an old code base and you may not remember the ins and outs clearly, right, of what you did, but you more than likely will remember, depending on how long it's been, how familiar you were with the code base before. And so I think a trap that you might fall into, or maybe this isn't a trap and you can comment on this, is you might go in and be like, I found the file in which I need to change the footer, which is what the client is asking for, but I'm not as familiar with everything, and so I'm a little bit worried about like rebuilding it or like whatever. And so I think you can possibly fall into the trap, or maybe this is what you need to do, of trying to become more familiar or become as familiar as you were with it before, but in like rapid like study cramming type style. And I think that you can fall into that trap of being like, some devs or anyone will be like, well, let's see what this does. Like, some people are just more adventurous, I guess, even with the daily tasks, like, well, let's see if this takes it down, boop, 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 and then that's it. Whereas other people are like, no, I used to know the ins and outs and knew exactly what this build would do every single time, exactly where it was. I need to be there before I'm confident in doing it. Now, that might apply to something that's exceptionally important that should never go down or something like that. Of course, play your cards as your situation is in front of you, basically. But what would you say to people like that, where, it's a website that if it goes down, you could just fix it. It's not like life-threatening, or there's not like a ridiculous amount of data, or like there's no risk of data loss, or, whatever. It's just like a marketing website. Do you think that do you think that it is a trap to fall back into to try to become as familiar with your code base? Or do you think that, like, would you be the person that just goes like, well, let's see how this goes? Or would you be the person that dives back in and goes like, Christ, I need to spend 2 days trying to figure out what the hell's going on here?
If I need to change a footer and that's it on that project for the next potential year or year and a half or 2 years or 3 years, I would do only that. And I would do it. I would be willing to break the website. But the thing is like, I'm always willing to break the site on my own machine. Whether I'm willing to break it, like if I have to go into like an FTP server and edit it live, which is not a realistic, expectation. No one's going to ask you to go on to like open up VS Code and link it directly to an FTP server. And every time you save, it saves to the FTP server on like the master, production. That's not going to happen to you. Like, that's not a thing that happens. But again, if it does, be careful. But if, like, most of the time, be willing to break it to like nothing. Like, never be afraid of like, oh, what if I change this and it breaks the whole thing? You can always revert. You can always undo. You can always go back to an old commit. Like, that should be the furthest thing on your mind. Whether to spend a bunch of time and get into that trap of learning a full project just to edit a footer, that I would say yes, like, avoid that trap, because if you have a bunch of stuff, like, you only have a capacity to know a certain amount of things at a time. If your main task is something completely unrelated to this one, and you were just asked to take a couple hours out of your day to edit a footer, take a couple hours out of your day and edit that footer and then go back to your main task. Don't cloud yourself with a bunch of knowledge that you don't need. But a lot of the time, or at least some of the time, you'll have a situation where, hey, we need to fire this project back up because we need to do a major change because we got a new feature that we need to implement into it. And we need to integrate it with the old code base. That's the assignment where you need to go through these steps and make sure you understand how the code base is interacting with each other. Because if you just, jank your way into that project without looking at the overall communications, something's going to go wrong either right away or down the line, and you're not going to be able to fix it. Right. And if it's something important, this could be a serious issue.
And of course, like we said, if you're one of those people that has to push directly into production, and you're working on a very critical website, maybe this isn't a trap. Like, maybe you should familiarize yourself to ensure that you know what you're doing. Because you don't want to, take down an entire bank's network or take down, like, a medical system that's crucial just because someone wanted the year changed in the footer. Like, do risk assessment, of course, right? I
guess it's possible, like, if it's a really old system that's not just running JS, Java, like JavaScript via... and HTML, it has like an SQL database associated with it and stuff like that it could be a live edit. It's just, I feel like that's got to be uncommon, and you've got to try to avoid doing that. Like,
the thing is, though, is like it might seem like it would be uncommon in the zeitgeist of the web developer, but there's a lot of web developers out there that are still using. I mean, WordPress uses SQL, but there's we're using a learning system right now on one of our projects that is absolutely using SQL, you know, and stuff like that. And some of that stuff is absolutely just a live edit.
Yeah, but you can absolutely have a local SQL database.
Absolutely, yes.
You can even take like the production database, back it up, and run it locally. You know what I mean? Like, you can get around that situation. I'm just thinking, is there a situation in that maybe you can't run it locally, or you can't just spin up another dev server, like
only the production is it, like that's it, like,
yeah,
there's no
only
test.
The production. I don't think that's a very common issue,
right?
Whether your company is forcing you to do that is a totally different aspect, but I think there's always a way around having to edit live code without trying it locally first, or at least on a dev server.
Right.
So that's what I would always aim for. If you don't, like Matt said, risk assess for sure. I think other than that, there's a file I'm going to link, and I don't know if we're going to throw up these show notes anytime soon, but in the future, when we have the HTML All Things website, hopefully we can throw that up. But it's this little tool called Rewind, and it's made by Giles Bowick. It's a GitHub. Bokit? Yeah, it's called Rewind. And essentially what it does is it analyzes your project's Git relationships and figures out what files were worked on the most and what files are worked on most recently. And this will give you a really good indication on what files to focus on your initial, discovery phase. So if this index file was focused on for was the most used index file, that's most likely the one that has all the initialization in it. You know what I mean? And those are the kinds of deductions you can make as you move forward through the process. It's a cool little tool. You can check it out. Again, I'm just going to say the name of the app again. It's called Rewind, and it's made by Giles Bowkett. So GilesBowkett. So I'm sure if you just Google Giles Bowkett Rewind, you'll find the Git repo.
You know what? That's actually invaluable. Just a real brief point.
Yeah.
Is it's exactly the same mentality as using the history command on Linux. I remember when one time we had a problem with something, and I'd never worked on this particular server. You would set it up, and you're like, I don't have the commands in front of me, whatever. Can you figure it out? And I was just like, sure. So I just like logged in, used the history command, figured out generally what you were working on. Then I dove in and was like, oh, okay, I need to do this. So same type of thing. Like if you're a sysadmin, same, because obviously there's some crossover. That's why I mention it. History, rewind, whatever, both completely and utterly useful tools that are like well overlooked usually. Well,
yeah,
other than, I don't know how overlooked rewind is, but history is.
It's pretty overlooked. I'm going to say it's pretty overlooked. I'm going to guarantee you that most of our audience has not used rewind or heard of it.
I've never heard of it until now. So,
yeah,
I mean.
Yeah, it's definitely overlooked. It shouldn't be. That should be like one of the first things, again, that you run in your discovery phase of a project, especially if it's a big one. Again, if do your own assessment. If it's a project that has literally like 3 files in it, that's like, hosting a cover page on a website and it's just HTML, JavaScript, CSS, you probably don't need it. Like you probably don't need rewind. Don't use it. But if it's a project that has 150 files in it and you need to figure out where one of your issues is, it's probably going to be in one of the most used files or one of the most recently updated files or something like that. So you can definitely use something like this. With that being said, let's move on to segment number 3, major refactoring or build from scratch. So sometimes you'll be faced with the decision on what to do with an older project. You'll need either keep supporting it, right, and keep building features onto an older project with an older technology, or build it again from scratch on a newer technology, right? That's gonna come up at some point in your web development career because it's just the nature of things. It's the nature of technologies. Stuff evolves, but you're always in that decision-making stage of like, okay, we've invested 3 years into this program, or 1 year or 2 years, whatever it is, and that does matter. And now, like, it is a very key part of our business. We are planning on moving forward with it and bringing more features out for it. Should we, sit down, discuss, do we want to create a completely new version of this, like version 2.0 on a completely new technology that will have better features and better support moving forward? That's going to happen. And there's many factors that can make up this decision. I'm just going to break it down to kind of 4 areas. One of them is going to be size of the project. So size of the project is going to matter a lot. If it's something that like has many, many moving pieces, like I'm talking 150 files again, it has like many developers working on it at the same time, it has a lot of different functionalities, it's going to be a completely different decision than rather a project that, again, is just JavaScript, HTML, CSS, right? It's going to be a lot easier for you to take that HTML, CSS, jQuery project, let's say, because it's an older technology, and then be like, okay, you know what? We want to convert this to Vue. Because right now, like we have it all in one file. Maybe it makes sense to break it out into multiple files, make it more reusable so that we can reuse the components or whatever. But if you have a project that's 150 files that was worked on by a team of 20 people, half those people have already left the company, that's a different aspect. Like how you have to go through the process of like breaking down what features you're currently using. You have to go through the process of breaking down what features you want to add to it, and then go through and analyze the amount of time it's going to take you to bring it up. And again, it's going to come down to a few of these other decision factors. So the other one is what devices and browsers you want to support. This one's a big one and kind of affects me personally currently. On one of the projects that we're working on, we're supporting devices that are running Android 5.1. And that kind of limits a few things. It doesn't limit a lot. Like it still supports Flexbox. It still supports a lot of the newish JavaScript APIs. But there's also a lot of like little things that it doesn't support. I think it doesn't support like absolute positioning with Flexbox combined. Like it's just a really weird little thing. It's just a very like specific example, but it's something that actually we've run into
that's
multiple
weird.
times.
That's like that's so particular. But I mean, I guess they're controlling that for some reason.
I don't know, like Android is controlling the WebView version of it. That's what we're using the application for, right? Like I believe you can still download one of the newer Chromes, but WebView doesn't get updated. That's tied to the system's Chrome version, right? So you're kind of screwed there. But essentially, we're not able to do some of our fancy positioning stuff with those devices. And that's how we have to build it moving forward. There's also other like little JavaScript things that aren't supported on it as well. I believe like let and const have not full support. There's a few other little things where some of the like arrow functions have an issue being supported sometimes. You have to babble them down, convert them to ES4 or whatever. So it's a consideration because again, these devices not only are running on older not only are they older because again they're built for 5.1, they're also running an older version. So you have to consider the resources it takes. So for instance, we have a device that has kind of like a media playback capability. I'm really hesitant to move those applications to a Vue.js React front end because again that adds a little bit of overhead. And those devices are already running at the edge of their limitations. So adding that little bit of overhead, it could cause some lag. It could cause some frame drops on the media. So what my suggestion to the team was, let's keep all of the media playback stuff as close to like regular JavaScript as possible. Remove any libraries that we can. Remove jQuery. Right now we're using jQuery on it. So that's my like minor refactor that I want to do. Let's remove jQuery so that even that is like another layer that we're going to get rid of. And let's make sure that we can use these devices as low powered and as out of date as they are to their full capacity. Because currently we don't have another device that can replace it. But we are looking at that, and maybe in the future we will be able to drop support for it. But for now, that was kind of my suggestion based on what we need to support. Like if you need to support Internet Explorer, you're probably not going to be using one of the newer technologies. You're
I would hope
use
not.
It's just the reality of it. Now, yes, you can build compatibility things where you can do a check to see if it's Internet Explorer and use an older technology for that. But that requires, again, another level of complexity. You have to, get your full team on board with that. And anytime you build a feature, you have to test it and make sure that it can work in both. And it adds another layer of issues that can be developed. And it adds another thing that like your older clients might not be able to see. And maybe if it's a really low percentage, you can just build core functionality. But for us on those 5.1 devices, that's like a majority of our devices. Or at least like a very high percentage. So we didn't have that option. We would have to support both regardless. So it didn't make sense to kind of build all these new features for only 60% of our audience. Another thing here is the time and resources available for the project. Sometimes, it's going to come down to that. So as much as you want and as much as it makes sense to completely refactor an old project or completely remake an old project in a new technology, like let's say like all these new features will be enabled, you might only have a couple weeks to do it because you have all these other stuff in the pipeline and you have to get it going. If you only have that, I mean, you have to be realistic with yourself. Building something from scratch is going to take time. So if your project management team, if your management isn't going to allow you to take the proper amount of time to build it out, don't do it. It's not worth it. If you think like, I can just pump this out in 2 weeks if I cram, don't do that to yourself or your team. It's not worth it. Absolutely. Support the project as it is, add on to it, do the minor refactors that you have to do and make it work. Because that's just it. At the end of the day, you're trying to get a task done. And if it completes the task, that's your goal. If you have the resources and time, and if it makes sense, if your project management team's like, hey, like we have the resources right now, it's year end, at the start of the year, it's going to be slow. Let's take 2 or 3 months to rebuild this project. It's a no-brainer if you have that kind of resource and time and if it makes sense.
And the thing is too, is like we've had it before where, I think it was more of a budget constraint, but we had to work on a website where it was just like an old version of Dreamweaver. And, just did what we had to do. Refactor what we had to, update what we needed to update because this website needed frequent updates, update what we had to update, and use Dreamweaver as needed. But basically, like, eventually we pushed for a refactor, but only when the time was right. It was years, I think, or at least 2 years, I think, or something like that, a while of us just using Dreamweaver. And that's
it was a long time because it made sense.
And it
did the job. It did the job. Like, as bad as it was a really bad experience for us editing it and for the user seeing it, but it literally did the job that was required of the website to show information about a certain business.
Yeah, like right? It was basically like us handing out information in forms. So it's like it wasn't a website all based on pictures and design. It wasn't like an art studio, and the people were able to expediently get what they wanted, and they knew where it was because they had used the website for a number of years. And therefore, even though it wasn't visually appealing or even like technically appealing, it was way better than us redoing the whole thing under rush with no budget, etc., etc. When the time was right, when the budget was there, the time was there, we jumped on it, and then we redid it. And that's exactly how we handled it.
Yeah. And I think that was the right way to handle it. As early as it was in our career, I think we did the right move. And the last thing here is familiarity. right? So how familiar are you with the technology that you're going to be changing, or are you with like the newer technology that you're going to be changing to? So again, another example, like I was really familiar with jQuery before. We moved on to Vue.js ever since for our reactive progressive frameworks, but I was really familiar with jQuery. So whenever we wanted to do a new project, it's always part of the consideration. It should never be the full part. Like if you're really familiar, like if you're amazing at Dreamweaver, that alone shouldn't make you use Dreamweaver, right? Because there's so many other reasons to not use it. But if you're really familiar with something, like if you're really familiar with jQuery, that should factor into your decision on what you want to do with the project. Whether or not it's the best technology out there, it shouldn't matter as much, right? It should be a combination of all four of these factors that I was just talking about, and it should be considered equally. So if all of your developers are, for instance, let's do a React versus Vue conversation. Let's say like everyone likes Vue better. Okay, sure, whatever. That's not really true. Obviously, React is still huge, but let's say that that's true. But your entire team is React based. Is it really worthwhile for you to take your team, rip out React and go to Vue just because it's a little bit faster, or just because it's a little bit newer? Even though that React does all the same functionality, has just as much support, if not more, all that. Like it doesn't really make sense, right? Like there shouldn't, that 100% should weigh into your decision, regardless of anything else. But if it's something like, hey, we built this in JavaScript, jQuery, PHP back in the day, and now we've switched to a different stack, like a Vue stack, like we have, and now let's go back to our old project, which we haven't touched in a few years. Are we familiar with that enough, or are we now more familiar with Vue, right? And should like that's the other part of the familiarity, is like you're now familiar with something newer. It kind of starts making sense to rebuild your older code base in your newer stack, especially if you're intending to support your newer stack for a lot longer than your old one. So those are the kinds of things that I wanted to put in mind. Again, there's no real answer to any question. Like if it would be very much dependent on all of these factors, and you would have to do a deep dive into all of them. Don't spend weeks deep diving. That's another little like rabbit hole that you can get into, another little trap that you can get into. This should be like a couple days at most of part-time, like looking through and talking over with your team, with your CTO, with your project lead, whatever, and then making a decision and sticking with it. That's the key. Don't do this like couple month thing of like, oh, every day on the stand up. Okay, are we doing it? No, we're not doing it. Yes, we're doing it. Okay, let's have a big argument. In the end of the day, as long as you have the time and resources, and as long as your team's bought in, both are going to work out well for you.
Yeah, I think that summed it up nicely. And I think another thing, just as a real brief thing, which I think you touched on anyway, but just to sort of drive it home, is you changing your technology or whatever. I guess this is more talking to the familiarity point, is you might actually lose team members. Like you could lose talent if someone's like, man, I want to just learn React, like I'm here to learn or like advance my skills with React, and you guys are switching to Vue, like I'm out of here. Especially if the job market's good at that moment, and there's a lot of React dev job openings around, you might lose that talent, and God knows how much you spent getting that talent. So you have to also factor in the fact that, yes, now you have to retrain people on Vue, and you have to refamiliarize with Vue, and you have to learn how to work as a team on Vue, and doesn't matter how similar or how different it is, you have to factor in the fact that you also may lose a team member. That's just a reality behind it as well.
Yep, it's true.
But last segment, I suppose, web news. So we're talking about Fone Lyfe again, and spelt FONELYFE just for fun. I don't know why I did that. I thought that writing Fone Lyfe the right way looked a little bit too plain, so I just wrote it like this. Anyway, that's my brain. But I have officially entered the 2 phone carrying businessman. So I was originally trained basically back in college, back in my BlackBerry working days as a co-op, because they just gave me a BlackBerry to use, and that was how I sort of divided my life. My regular phone, if you can call it that, my personal phone, had all my friends and all my personal plans on there, and then all my work stuff was on my BlackBerry. I eventually got a BlackBerry for a personal phone, but it was still separate. I basically had 2 BlackBerries at that point. Now when we first started the business, I was having everything on one phone, and that was fine for a while, especially since there was minimal stuff coming in as the business grew. But as we've been slowly being put on larger and larger projects, as we've mentioned before this year, the requests are coming in at like a unprecedented rate, or like it's not like it's every single day, but it's always at like weird times or whatever. And it's common enough that it started becoming a problem. And so also social media was a major problem because I have all my personal social media stuff, all my work social media stuff. And so my phone, literally, I would say drive 20 minutes. So I'm not checking my phone, then get out of the car or wherever I'm at, check my phone. 100, like, wouldn't be like weird to see 100 notifications, because it's like, this person liked this person retweeted this person tweeted this person liked your photo, this person messaged you, and it just got overwhelming. And not to mention the biggest one was the stress factor of people just derailing me even on days off. So I would check my phone to like talk to a friend, and suddenly someone's complaining about something being down, and even if I'm not obligated to fix it that day, I would just have a hard time keeping that out of my mind. And I'm like, fuck, like now they're having trouble with it, like I better go look, now I'm worried, like how bad is this, what's the problem? And they're like, now their users are pissed, like let me go look. And it just became that. So I can say that this, splitting my phone again is really helping me. I'm being more responsive with people that I know, like personally. I'm actually like checking my phone, knowing that the notifications are actually for personal, and that, so I'm like not afraid to check my phone. I am leaving my work where I'm leaving my work, so effectively on the weekend I'll check it here and there, but not all that much, and I'm like choosing to check it. And that actually came in handy this week because there was a problem with someone's site really late at night, and this person had called me and texted me, and that would normally, I had plans that night, online plans, but regardless, and that like would have derailed my plans and maybe worried all night, and it would have been like freaking out. But now I chose to check it. I saw it. I dealt with it in the moment, and then I just sort of moved on, and I was able to like leave that. And I didn't get the phone call. I didn't get those text messages until I chose to get them. Now, of course, I'm not trying to use this to be lazy, but this is making us a lot more active on social media. Mike is sending a lot of photos of his desk. I'm taking some photos of my coffee and stuff like that. It's just making it better. Like it comes back to that reaching for a tool sentiment, where when I pick up my iPhone, which is what I have, an iPhone 11 for work, when I reach for my iPhone, I'm reaching for work. And I know what I'm looking at. I know what I'm going to deal with. I know what the potential of what's happening and whatever. But when I'm trying to make a personal plan or a personal whatever, I will grab my phone, and then that's my phone again, is basically what I wanted. Still some things to separate. A couple people still haven't been moved over or whatever. But for the most part, like emails and everything are all moved over. And I'm just getting a lot, like I'm ripping through notifications, even though it's on two phones. You would think it takes me longer. I'm ripping through them because I'm in work mode or in work hours or whatever, and I'm picking up my iPhone, and then I'm just ripping through all my work notifications. I'm not entering this roller coaster of personal notification, work, personal, work, and then I'm having this weird prioritization complex. Yes, there's still prioritization in answering things, but I'm entering, what's priority for work life? What's priority for social life? And I'm just getting a lot. I think I'm actually might be even sleeping better, to be totally blunt. Like I used to get a lesser quality sleep. I know that sounds weird just by getting a separate phone, but like I've been sleeping for sometimes only, let's say like 6 hours in a night, and I'm actually like refreshed sometimes, and not always, but like I would always need, like lately I've been sleeping a bunch just because there's a hell of a lot going on in each and every day, personal and otherwise. And so this is like really helping me, basically. What started this too was I got an iPad as a Christmas gift last year. And I just said, I was like, you know what? When I'm on my iPad, this is my entertainment device. I'm controlling the smart TV, or I'm playing a game on the iPad itself, or I'm looking something up, or I'm using it as a Netflix machine, or whatever it is. This is my personal device, and I don't want to be bothered. And so I never signed into any emails, personal or otherwise. I never did any of that. And then I was telling Mike, I was like, this is my favorite device right now. Because if I want to escape, I just flip everything off and just flip my phones over into the do not disturbs, whatever. And then or my phone at that time. And then I go to my iPad and I use that. So this has really allowed me to separate stuff. Basically, one of the big problems was like, when I'm eating dinner or whatever, I would answer friends, but then work would come in on the same device and it would derail even my dinner. Like, I'm very much a person that like can get derailed easily. I don't know if that's, well, it's probably not great, but it's just what happens. I think Mike said it best one day. He's like, I get pissed off when I get interrupted, because the thing is it's like, hat is important. Random client work is important, but like, let's say I'm working on someone's website and I'm just working on it, right? It's not done. I'm just working on it. It's not public. And I'm like, okay, I want to get this done this afternoon. And then someone calls me because they accidentally like deleted their logo and they're freaking out because their logo isn't rendering. Now I have to go and like figure out what happened and deal with it. And I'm not a person that can just leave that alone. I am getting better at that, but I think I need that separation of being like, man, I'm not dealing with this right now. Turn this phone into do not disturb, just leave it, and I can use my personal phone. I definitely recommend it, to be blunt. I definitely recommend it. Yes, it's annoying, sure, carrying two phones. Yes, you now have two phones. Yes, you now have two phone plans. But the thing is it's just, it's a lot less stressful. Like, to summarize, it's a lot less stressful for me. I know what tool I'm reaching for, and I know what to expect in general. Like, yes, there can be an absolute, firestorm of problems in my personal life, but I deal with them differently. If someone's having a major crisis in their life or something and they text me, I deal with those differently than work stuff. And now I know what I'm reaching for. And the worst combination ever was when somebody was having a crisis in work, and then a friend was also having a crisis, and I'm reading both these notifications, was like, who the hell do I answer? And now it's like this bit, and now it's like, well, now what? And so this is just, separation's good. There'll always be a little bit of bleed, like some clients will like send me a Facebook message, and so I'll like get that on my personal device. But for the majority of things, it is absolutely separated, and it's just, honestly, it's just a lot better.
So I have a couple questions. One question is, how did you get all the clients to switch to your work phone?
So like I said, some of them are still left behind on Messenger and stuff like that. But what I did tell them is basically like, this is my phone number now. Like, hey, I have a new phone number. This is my phone number now. And then I'll use a lot of our clients, like I'll text. And so I'll just like text them and be like, hey, like I'll text them from my personal number and be like, hey, this is my new number. I don't mention my personal number that like is changing to my personal number. I just say, hey, this is my new number. I'm going to text you from my new number. Please use this in the future. I add it to my signature, which actually Siri Assistant or whatever will actually change the phone number in some people's address books if they have that on. Because I've typoed my phone number once, and then people were calling the wrong phone number, and people were like, why the hell? And I didn't know what the heck was going on, because I was like, no, I've told everyone my real number. And then I realized I typoed it in one of my email apps, and like an idiot. And then Siri Assistant was updating their contacts or whatever. I'm not like super versed. I don't know if it's actually called Siri Assistant, but it's something to do with Siri. Basically, it had actually done it to two clients. But the point of the matter is, basically what I do is I change that, so hopefully Siri Assistant kicks in on their phones. And then I'm also just like telling them, like I've just told them, like I'm switching and that's it. I don't mention that I'm keeping the personal number, because I know for sure that they will be like, oh, well, it's the weekend. I'll just text him on his personal number so he sees it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. Like, I'm surprised they haven't taken advantage of that. But yeah, that's a good strategy, I think.
Well, I'll tell you one thing.
Don't even give them that option.
I'll block them too. I don't care because I've told them this is the communication channel.
Exactly. Like I would be like, if someone calls you on your personal one, I would definitely not pick it up. 100%.
Yeah.
Or just pick it up with like an accent and just say wrong number or something.
Yeah, just mask it so they don't know it's me. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that. But yeah, that's a good strategy. Another question, tech wise, is it a pain to keep both phones charged? And what do you do with headphones? Because now there's no headphone jacks. I mean, you might have like the actual wired headsets and stuff like that, but do you have like a separate wireless headphones for this phone and for that phone? Or do you like forget and pair again? Like, how do you do that?
So I don't really use the work phone for much media per se.
What about calls?
Calls I just actually take on speakerphone. Actually, I just put the phone right on my desk and then I just like work, because like usually I like take a look while they're talking to me. Usually because a call is like a problem generally, or I'll just do it like a regular, like I'll hold the phone type of thing. But like if I had to use Bluetooth, I do have so many Bluetooth headsets. I probably would just pair another one. I have a bunch of cheap ones that I use. Like I just throw them in a bag, and if they break, I just get another set. So I have like 2 or 3 of those, and so I would probably just pair one of those. But I haven't reached that scenario yet. Maybe when like the lockdowns and stuff end, maybe like I'll be on the go more. But even then, like when I'm on the go, maybe I'll have my work phone on silent and only check it every few hours or whatever the case may be, for sure. But what's super interesting is that the iPhone, so the iPhone 11 has a really good battery, and because I'm splitting use, my Note 10 Plus, which also has a good battery, even though it's a year old now-ish, now because I'm splitting use, the battery is really good on both. Like it's even better because I'm using them each less, and so I'm actually just wirelessly charging them like every other night. So I just have one phone on charge every other night, basically.
Okay.
Because I only really charged my Note 10 Plus, even when I was at work, even when it was work and personal, I would charge it pretty much every other night, or sometimes it would be like, before I went to bed, I would have to charge it like 2-3 hours before I went to bed the second day. Like it'd last for like a day and 3/4, like a day plus a 3/4 of another day, or 2 days sometimes, depending on heavy use. Now it's like pretty much 2 days consistently, and I'm basically just throwing them on a wireless charger and then just doing it that way. I am getting like a new desk because this desk is just falling apart, and so I am gonna get like a nice, fast like wireless charger 2.0 whatever one that like sits up. So I'm gonna put that on my desk, and I think for the most part, unless otherwise needed, I'm probably gonna try to make the iPhone's charging schedule during work on that little charger. Like I'll just toss it on there, it'll charge up, and then you know what I mean. Like it'll charge up, and then that's it. Like it's easy enough to deal with, I suppose. Like you would think it's a pain with like adapters and everything, but with the versatility of wireless charging, actually, it's really nice. Just plop it on the desk and then that's it. I will say one thing that was annoying, but I actually ended up liking it, was I like to text people, but from my computer, so I can quickly type and like quickly take screenshots and quickly send them stuff. But I feel less obligated to do that, and I still like, obviously offer support, but I feel less obligated to offer like really, really detailed text message support now. Text messages are, because I can't get them on my PC, or at least I don't know how, from the iPhone, I just have to type them on the phone. And so I will instead opt for an email, of which I'm getting a lot more information in, and I email much less frequently. So I'm actually getting the same amount of support across with a lot less detail, and so it's actually saving me time. And when I get notifications on my PC, short of like being a workday or whatever, and like my work email, I'm actually just getting personal like DMs, like chats. Discord is the one exception. Messenger, on an exceptionally rare basis, which hasn't even happened yet, is another exception. But that's basically how I'm doing it. Like there's been a couple of days where it'll be like the end of the day, whatever, last few hours, and I need to do like a bunch of social media work. And I just hop on the iPhone, and I'm on the iPhone for 2 to 4 hours, let's say, of just like dealing with social media, dealing with checking insights, responding to people, answering people's messages, just doing stuff like that, researching. Like we're doing research for another type of way to share our show out. So like I do my research on there, and what's great about it is AirDrop, which AirDrop I know is between Apple devices, but there's been a couple of times where something's like I get something personal on my work phone, and so I need it on my personal device. So I'll just AirDrop it to my iPad, and then that's it. And then it's like it's literally that easy. So I'm not getting into the Apple ecosystem fully. Like AirDrop's really cool, whatever. It has its problems. I don't like how I can't get my SMS on computer. I think that's still weird. Like I'd like to still have it there, I think. But I think it's actually beneficial that it's not there, but I still have that craving. But if
you had a Mac, you could have it.
But I'm not doing that. If I do that, I'm going to do Mac in a cloud.
You're going to get the new Mac
I'm
Mini.
not doing that.
It sounds like you're going to do it.
No. It did take me a while. Okay, the lack of a back button, like this is just purely OS problem now. The lack of a back button's weird. Like half the time I'm like, how do I go back? And sometimes it's swipe from left. Sometimes you got to go to the top left corner, which is annoying to click.
Yeah.
It's just weird sometimes, stuff like that. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. Another weird thing I'm not seeing work-related pictures in my gallery.
Which is nice.
And that helps me immensely because I'll like want to go back and like look at some pictures and I'm like, fuck, there's all this work stuff. And it immediately, I have that thing where I like immediately get derailed and then I go and do some work stuff. And it just destroys me internally for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But now I'm legitimately getting more done faster in a more calm manner, which is huge for me, to be clear. I'm less stressed overall, and I believe I'm getting better sleep. So the 2-phone life is the life for me, if you will.
Solid. But yeah, I think that's it for my questions. That was really interesting. I mean, the thing for me, and I'll just quickly touch on it. I'm not ready to do the 2-phone thing yet because I guess it doesn't bother me as much. That's the difference for me, is that I'd rather have all my notifications come on one phone and then have the opportunity to just mute notifications across the board, rather than having to deal with 2 devices and forgetting to check one or the other and missing a notification. For me, that's the bigger pain point, is missing notifications rather than them bothering me or derailing me. Not that it hasn't happened at inopportune times. Like, I've had situations where I was like on vacation, relaxing in a cottage, and I got a stupid message from work, and it was just something that could have definitely waited. And it's like, I mean, I'm not blaming anyone for this, but like, it's just something that happens where they just send a message with a question, an open-ended question, and then you sit there thinking about it for 8 hours. That's for sure happened. It's pretty rare, and I'm just not ready to commit to the 2-phone thing. But I think it's something I'll keep an eye on you, especially once you start traveling around, once the lockdowns lift, once like COVID goes away. I'm really curious on how that experience will be with you having like, 2 phones in your pocket all the time, 2 phones in your car. Like, do you remember both of them? So that, I think we'll have a follow-up episode about the 2 phones sometime in the future. So I think people should stay tuned for that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. Like right now it's very much like a wireless but yet tethered to the home device because I'm not going really anywhere. And if I do go somewhere, I'm just running out to the store, so I'm not taking the work phone. But you're right, like it'll be interesting. Like I'll probably have to get what I call, and I'm not calling anyone with these a dork, but I call them a dork holster for my work phone. That's what I used to do for my Blackberries. The official Blackberry holster, by the way. But yeah, no, I might have to get a holster, or I might just have like, I'm at the point where I always need a damn charger or something. So I might just have to start carrying a messenger bag, and that might just be what I bring around. But just like when I'm going out on an extended thing, like if I'm just popping over to your place, even though you're like maybe, 40 minutes from here, not even really, more like 30. If you're like 30 minutes away, since I'm going like from house to car to house again, I maybe wouldn't bring the messenger bag, and I would just have them in my pocket uncomfortably or whatever. But if I'm going to like Toronto for the week and I like might have to check the phone every now and then or whatever, depending on what my schedule requires, then I might bring the messenger bag, and that'll just be something that becomes a part of me. Like I might just always be the guy with the messenger bag. Who knows? We'll see. But yeah, it'll be interesting for sure. And it's been working out really well so far. Whether it's, I think the thing is like you're right. Like it's the just to sort of wrap up. It's the like you're thinking about it for that 8 hours, like you were saying. But for me, I'm thinking about it and trying not to think about it. So I'm creating a negative experience for myself by fighting myself, being like, no, this is my time off. Stop thinking. And then my brain keeps thinking, and now I'm thinking, oh my god, I've just like made myself a negative experience, and then I'm like panicking about that, and it's just like a whirlwind of like, God knows what. So. It's just, whatever. Like, this is just the way for me, I think. This is just the way forward. This is the way it was before, and I didn't have a problem with it, and this is the way now. I definitely get the UX of the 1-phone life, but I prefer the 2. But to conclude here, remember on that Patreon. Remember, we also have that before the show, like I said, little mini audio show. Check that out. Free for everybody right now. On patreon.com/HTML all the things. If you want to support us, of course, you can also become a patron, and many thanks to our $3 tier patrons. Sean from RabbitWorks JavaScript on youtube.com/RabbitWorks JavaScript. Garrick from Local Path Computing and Web Design on localpathcomputing.com. Ryan Gatchell from Blue Black Digital on blueblackdigital.com. Chris from Selfmade Web Designer on selfmadewebdesigner.com. Tim from The Web Hacker on thewebhacker.com. DL Ford from dl4.io. And Bib Hashdash from 9block Media on 9blockmedia.com. Feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform that you're listening to this on. And we are signing off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things Podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media. On Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.